Understanding these three things totally changed the way that my videos came out at the end. My content looked better, I had more creative control, my clients were noticing, which made me able to charge them more because of the quality that I was putting out in every single post. As a beginner videographer, I made tons of mistakes. Anywhere from not charging properly for my work, to choosing the wrong niche, to having to spend hours in post fixing bad footage. But honestly, my biggest mistake was not understanding my camera specs. You see, knowing what you want your image to look like is half of the battle, but knowing how to get there, that's the real goal. And it all comes down to what we like to call the holy trinity of videography. That's understanding your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. So if you're just guessing with your settings, your videos are going to suffer, even if you have a $4,000 setup. But once you understand how they work together, that's when you unlock cinematic control, consistent quality, and content that gets you paid. So let's start off with the first point of the triangle, which is knowing your ISO. Your ISO controls how sensitive your camera sensor is to light. A low ISO like 100 or 200 gives you the cleanest image. No grain, nice and crisp. A high ISO like 3200 or 6400 makes your sensor more sensitive in low light, but it comes at a cost. More grain and noise in your image. So a pro tip, if you want the cleanest image, always try to shoot in your lowest ISO. But if you're shooting on cameras like the Sony a7S III or even the FX3, this one has a dual native ISO, which allows you to push your ISO higher and still get really crisp, clean images in low light. Look at these videos that I recently did for a resort out in Fredericksburg. We're shooting at 10, 12, 1 in the morning, and look how amazing this footage looks like in low light situations. Now, when I didn't know this, the footage that I was producing was way too grainy and was unusable and was making me look like an amateur to a bunch of my clients. So understanding how to properly use your ISO, especially if you're going into events, real estate, even food and beverage because it's dim and low light, will give you the best and the cleanest footage that you can have, and it's gonna make your clients wanna hire you again. Now, the second part of the triangle is shutter speed. Your shutter speed controls how much your camera sensor is exposed to light and also what the motion is going to look like. So here's the golden rule for shutter speed. If you want, go ahead and pause it and take a screenshot right here. Your shutter speed needs to be 2 times your frame rate. So if you're shooting in 24 frames a second, then you need to use 1/50 shutter speed. If you're shooting at 60 frames a second, then you need to be using a 1/125 shutter speed. And if you want to get some really good slow motion, you got to be shooting at 120 frames a second, which means you need to bump up to 1/250 or 1/500 for crisp movement. The reason this matters is because having the right shutter speed is going to give you the correct motion blur. And having the right motion blur is what's going to make your work look from an amateur to a professional, because it's going to come off appealing to the eyes in the right way. You don't want your footage to look choppy or messed up. You want it to look smooth and well lit. And now the last point of the triangle is your aperture. Now your aperture controls how wide your lens opens, which controls these three things. 1, your light. A wide aperture like 1.8 or 2.8 lets in more light, perfect for low light shooting. Second is your bokeh. The wider your aperture, the blurrier your background. So if you're looking for that creamy, buttery smooth bokeh, having that at a 1.4 or 1.8 is what's going to get you there. And the third thing that it controls is your depth of field. Smaller aperture like f8 or f11 gives you more in focus. Now this is great for real estate, landscapes, or cityscapes. Here's a pro tip. If you're shooting interviews or testimonials or anything where people are talking on camera and you want it to look cinematic with that blurry background, then choose a lens that is at 1.4 or 1.8. But if you're looking to get more things in focus, then you can have that at a f4 all the way up to an f8. But make sure that you're lighting properly for this scene. Now let's talk about the best settings for different scenarios. Now, I have filmed almost in all situations, from the sunniest outside event in Texas to very snowy, dark days in Arizona, Colorado, and other places. And these are the best settings that I found when filming in so many different scenarios. First, let's talk about cinematic video. Now, this could be for YouTube, testimonials, interviews, or even B-roll. Now, your frame rate is going to be 24 frames a second, which means your shutter speed should be 1/50. And here, make sure that you have your ISO as low as possible without having any grain in your image. And for this, I always recommend an aperture that is at least 1.8 to 2.8 to make sure that you're getting some of that bokeh in your background. Now for real estate, it depends on the lighting situation. So it could be either 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second, which would put your shutter speed at it either at 1/50 or 1/60. Again, your ISO is going to be as low as possible without having any grain in your image. And then your aperture, you're gonna want this at either a 5.6 all the way up to maybe an f8 because you want everything to be in focus. Now, the last thing is if you're shooting in slow motion. So let's say this could be for B-roll or even some action shots. Now for this, you're gonna want your frame rate at either 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second, depending on one, how high your camera goes, and two, what you're filming. Which means your shutter speed is gonna be either 1/125 or 1/250. Again, keep your ISO as low as possible without revealing any grain. And lastly, make sure your aperture is at either a 2.8 or maybe an f4. Again, this all depends on your lighting situation. I'm gonna be real with y'all. Once I understood ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, my videos completely changed. My content was looking better. I had way more creative control. My clients were noticing. So the fact that they were seeing the quality that I was putting out on a daily basis in return made them want that same kind of quality. And that allowed me to raise my prices and also get more clients that were willing to pay that amount. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one who made these mistakes as a beginner videographer, but once I made these changes, like I said, everything changed in my videography business. So I hope that you're catching this early so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. And if these tips helped you, leave a comment below and let me know what other types of videos y'all would like to see. But if y'all want to check out more of my work, you can click right up here to see more of the things that I'm into when it comes to living in Austin. Or if you like these tutorials and tips and how I edit, then click this video right up here. Until next time, catch y'all on the flip side. Peace out.